Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Z Talks with your host, Zaria Musgrove, where I talk about books, movies, and TV shows that relate to history and classic literature. Now, today I will be switching it up on the podcast moving forward because I will be including places and things on the podcast. And the inspiration for this is because I have recently moved to London. So there are a lot of places around me that have a lot of rich history, and I will be going to museums to see a lot of exhibits, and they include objects that I would like to talk about with you guys. So the tagline for the podcast will not just say books, movies, and TV shows. It will say books, movies, TV shows, places, and things that relate to history in classic literature. So that is why you will see behind me that my bookshelf looks different. It has a lot of different books on it. If you look up there, you will see the bookshelf has a lot of gaps. That is because when I moved from Turks, I had to downsize a lot because moving from there to here, you can't carry as much books. So I will be stocking my bookshelves slowly, and while I stock it, I will be telling you guys about the books that I am stocking. So, the first place that I will be talking about in the new scope of the podcast, so places and things, is the first place that I went to when I came to the UK, which is Cambridge. So, without further ado, let's get into it and talk about Cambridge. Now, I just want to say, since I'm now in the city, if you hear any background noise behind me, just know that the street is busy, the city is busy, and I can't do anything about it. So just bear with me. But I will try my best to give you guys some good audio quality, but just beware, this city is always a bustling and hustling. So just acknowledging that there. Now we move on. So, Cambridge. That was the first place I went to when I came to the UK, and I can say that it is beautiful. The architecture in Cambridge is one of a kind, and it really got me inspired in order to come on here and talk to you guys about it. So, one of the first places I went to while I was in Cambridge is, of course, a bookstore. It is called Heifer's Bookstore, and I, of course, did pick up some books. So, I picked up two books. The first book I picked up is called The Last SARS. This is exactly what the title says it is. It's about the last Tsar in Russia and his abdication, as well as his rule, and about the Romanov dynasty in general. So I'm really excited to read this one. And the second book that I picked up is called The Cossacks. I actually read this book in a week within getting it from the bookstore because it is short, it's really small, and it's really cute. I love small books that you can just put in any handbag. And this book is amazing. It's by Leo Tolstoy. He's an amazing writer, and I am really excited to share this book with you guys in the upcoming weeks on the podcast. So stay tuned for that. It is a romance, so if you guys love a little romance, I will definitely say to come and to hear about this book as well as the history that is steeped in this book. You get to hear about the War of the Caucasus, which I haven't even heard about before, but is prevalent in this book. So stay tuned for that as well as the romance because I am really in my romance era right now. So if you guys have any historical romance recommendations, please drop it in the comments. But stay tuned for this in the next 2 weeks. But back to the bookstore. So the Heifer's bookstore that I went to, I really regret not taking pictures while I was in there, but I am not too sad about it because I was too focused on getting books. But while I was in there, I was thinking about the bookstore and its large collection and how I could really tell that it's been stocking books for a while. So I did my Googles when I got out of there, and I found that the bookstore was actually there since 1876, which was kind of shocking to me because the bookstore obviously has architecture, which is some indication to the length of time that it's been there, which is longer than the 21st century. But it didn't indicate to me that it had been that long. So I was thinking about places around in the town of Cambridge that also might share such a long and rich history, which got me to think about the place in the town that shares the same name, which is the University of Cambridge. So, as soon as I left Cambridge, one of the first things I did was go on the university website and look up the town and look up the university. Because when I was there, the university was beautiful. I will drop some pics in here for you guys to see. And the history is just as, I wouldn't say beautiful, but interesting. So, on the University of Cambridge's website, as well as the Museum of Cambridge website as well, I found that it talked about the university actually starting to deliver courses in 1226. As the scholars were organized there, they started delivering courses in that year, but they actually came to Cambridge from Oxford in 1209. Now, it's a bit of tea as to why they came to Cambridge from Oxford. It is because they were fleeing Oxford because of the disputes that the scholars and the townsfolk had in Oxford. So they came over to Cambridge in 1209 and then started organizing and delivering courses in 1226. But one of the things that was interesting to me is that in subsequent years, in order to prevent the disputes that happened between the townsfolk and the scholars that happened in Oxford from happening in Cambridge, the king at the time, Henry III, placed the scholars in Cambridge under his royal protection in order to stop the scholars from having, I would say in modern terms, beef with the townspeople. He put them under his royal protection. But it's ironic because him doing this and him granting them, I would say, special privileges with this royal protection actually led to them having more beef with the townsfolk, which is ironic because he did that to prevent that, but him doing that actually not caused it, but definitely didn't stop it from happening and may have let it happen a little bit more than it would have if he didn't do that. So that was interesting. And along that same vein, I found that one of the major point of contentions between the townsfolk and the scholars was the university courts. So I read about this article. Also, if you see me looking at my iPad, it's because this is the new format that I will be looking from. In the podcast episodes, the Lilo and Stitch notebook is in Turks. I forgot it. Um, to my dismay, when I came here, I was looking for my Lilo and Stitch notebook in my boxes and realized that I forgot it. So it will no longer feature on the podcast unless I find another Lilo and Stitch notebook, which will be really hard to find. So for now, it is going electronic with my iPad. So if you see me looking, that's what I am looking at. But I digress. I read an article about the University of Cambridge and the courts. And the article is called Litigation and Locality, the Cambridge University Courts, 1560 to 1640. It was written by Alexandra Shepherd in the Journal of Urban History. And this article basically talks about how the university courts actually was headed by the chancellor of the University of Cambridge, who was able to rule on the ecclesiastical rulings of the scholars, which basically means that if any case came before the university courts that had to do with the moral standing of the scholars and their integrity, the chancellor was able to rule on it. But this didn't stay that way for long. The chancellor actually had his powers expanded due to him just enjoying privileges from the protection that they got from the king at the time. So his powers expanded from moral cases and integrity to cases on civil matters like wills and petty crimes like theft. So it transition from moral integrity to cases that you would actually think would be done in the town's courts. But since it happened to be with the scholars, and the scholars were separate and apart because of the royal protection they got, their courts was able to rule on everything scholars except for major crimes like murder. Now, the courts didn't just stay with the scholars, they actually experienced an expansion in power during the Elizabeth I era. So I will read you guys a quote which talks about how their powers were expanded during the Elizabeth I era in order to rule on cases that involved townspeople. So the first quote I will read is beginner quote. Beginning of quote. The vice chancellor and his commissary were also entitled to hear instance litigation or civil actions stemming from personal pleas which did not concern landed property in which a member or employee of the university was involved. Because its jurisdiction extended beyond its members to include those privileged as scholars' servants, the university presided over many instance causes involving townspeople. End quote. So basically, this quote is talking about how if the case came before the University of Cambridge courts that involved a scholar and a townsperson, like the dispute was between someone from the university and someone not from the university, then the court could also preside on it, which became a point of contention between the townspeople and the scholars because these are cases which you would think would come under the remit of the courts in the town. But no, if it involved a scholar, even if it had the involvement of a townsperson, as soon as it involved a scholar, the courts from the university were the ones to rule on it as long as it wasn't a major crime. And because the scholars obviously would get some sort of special treatment from the university because they're from the university, it became a thing where the rulings of these cases weren't actually always fair because the university is ruling on a case involving someone from their own group, one of the scholars, and someone from not their group, someone not from their group, which was a townsperson. So you can kind of tell the way in which the chancellor would rule on these cases, which was obviously not in the favor of the townspeople. So that would actually cause a little bit of contention there. And in addition to that, they were actually ruling on an even more expanded scope. I will read you guys a quote right now so you can see what I'm talking about. So, beginning of quote. The university also held statutory powers to oversee all weights and measures within the town of Cambridge, besides the excises of bread, ale, beer, wine, candles, hay, and firewood. End quote. So the university not only was able to rule on things such as policing, civil matters, petty crimes, moral standing. They were also able to rule on things involving trade and taxes and licensing that involved scholars and townspeople in the town. So they actually were really powerful during this era, which you can see as a townsperson. You're there just living your life, and then you go undergo this big change when the scholars flee from Oxford to Cambridge. They set up the university, and then they get special powers from Henry III. They grow in prominence, and then you have this university exercising powers from their courts, which could involve people from the town. So you can see how that was a point of contention, especially since the rulings on these cases might not have always been fair. So that was really interesting to me because it never dawned on me that a university could hold so much power through its courts and influence the lives of the people around it outside of the people that went to the university. And it kind of makes more sense now because the university and the town do share the same name. So it can show a bit of the power that it held, I'm guessing. And that was just interesting to me. The university was kind of, the main dog, in lack of a better terms. They were the main thing in that era. And the university website also acknowledges this past and says, and I quote, the last vestiges of these rights did not disappear until the 19th century, and the university retains even today certain responsibilities in connection with policing and licensing. End quote. So the university still holds a really prominent place in the town of Cambridge, not through its courts in the modern age, because the courts are not holding that prominence anymore. It's not really a segment of the university that is exercised anymore. In the modern age, all things are done through the town's courts, which is something that is normally done in other towns. And besides that, the university still holds some power in terms of these policing and licensing that it was able to oversee in past centuries, which was really interesting to me because you don't see that with a lot of other universities, as they might have not been around for such a long time or held privileges directly from royal statures. So I encourage you guys to go to Cambridge and feel the power as you stand next to the university, because you can tell that it holds prominence even through the architecture and the main fact that people travel to Cambridge almost on a daily basis just to see the university, because it is such a tourist attraction for good right. But even more than being a tourist attraction, it is an historical attraction for us history buffs out there that are really interested in the history of places and things. So, yeah, that is honestly all I have to say today about Cambridge. If I do any additional research and find any more things, I will be talking about it on socials, which you guys should follow me on. Z Talks with Zaria M on Instagram and TikTok. And if you guys want to hear me talk about more places and things, or books, movies, and TV shows, you just have to tune in the next 2 weeks on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music to hear more on Z Talks.